Hello and welcome back to the William Gomes podcast. I am William Gomes and I am grateful to have you here. This series is called Reading Seminar 1 and 2, Lacan's Return to Freud, Revisited. In the previous episode, we explored narcissism and the imaginary dimension. We saw how the ego is sustained through identification with images of coherence and wholeness, and why this imaginary stability is both necessary and misleading for psychoanalytic work. In this episode, we address another closely related problem: the role of knowledge in analysis. At first glance, psychoanalysis appears to be a knowledge based practice. Analysts are trained, they study theory, they learn concepts, structures, and clinical distinctions. It would therefore seem obvious that psychoanalysis proceeds through knowledge. And yet, Jacques Lacan repeatedly warns that knowledge can become one of the most powerful obstacles to analysis. To understand why, we need to distinguish between three things that are often conflated: knowledge, opinion, and truth. Let us begin with knowledge. Knowledge in the ordinary sense is organized, transmissible, and stabilizing. It classifies, explains, and makes phenomena intelligible. In science, this stabilizing function is essential. Without it, inquiry would not progress. But psychoanalysis is not a science of objects. Its object is the divided subject whose truth does not appear as stable knowledge. When knowledge enters analysis uncritically, it tends to close down speech. Once something is known, it no longer needs to be said. It can be categorized, named, and set aside. This is why Lacan insists that analytic knowledge must never function as doctrine. When theory is applied as a grid, it replaces listening. Speech is filtered through concepts rather than allowed to produce its own effects. This danger is particularly acute in training contexts where theoretical mastery can become a defense against analytic uncertainty. Lacan is not opposed to theory. On the contrary, he insists on rigorous conceptual work, but theory must remain subordinate to speech. Knowledge must be held lightly. This brings us to opinion. Opinion is not the same as knowledge. Opinion is local, habitual, and often unexamined. It appears in the form of clinical common sense, professional consensus, or institutional norms. In psychoanalysis, opinion often takes the form of assumptions about what is healthy, mature, or normal. For example, it may be assumed that autonomy is preferable to dependence, that emotional expression is healthier than inhibition, or that insight leads to change. These assumptions are rarely questioned. They circulate as obvious truths. For Lacan, opinion is particularly dangerous because it masquerades as neutrality. When an analyst intervenes from opinion, they impose norms without acknowledging them as such. The analyst and is subtly guided toward an ideal that appears self-evident. This is how psychoanalysis risks becoming moral instruction under the guise of therapy. Lacan's return to Sigmund Freud resists this drift. Freud did not treat psychoanalysis as a means of educating the subject into normality. He treated it as a method for encountering conflict that does not submit to norms. Lacan radicalizes this position by insisting that both knowledge and opinion must be placed in question within analysis. This brings us to truth. Truth in psychoanalysis is neither knowledge nor opinion. Truth is not transmissible in the way knowledge is. It cannot be taught or learned directly. It appears as an effect of speech, often where knowledge fails. Truth is disruptive rather than stabilizing. When truth appears, it does not confirm what the subject already knows. It introduces uncertainty. It unsettles identity. It reveals division. This is why Lacan insists that truth is not whole. There is no final truth of the subject that could be captured in a formula. Every appearance of truth leaves something unresolved. This is not a limitation of psychoanalysis, it is its condition. If truth could be fully known, analysis would end in doctrine. The subject would be replaced by a theory. Understanding this distinction has direct consequences for the analyst's position. The analyst must resist occupying the place of the one who knows. This does not mean the analyst knows nothing. It means that the analyst refuses to present knowledge as truth. When the analyst speaks from knowledge, they risk foreclosing speech. When they speak from opinion, they risk imposing norms. The analyst's task is to sustain a position of not knowing that allows truth to emerge indirectly. This not knowing is not ignorance. It is a disciplined refusal to close the gap that speech opens. This is why Lacan insists that analytic authority cannot be grounded in expertise alone. Authority in analysis arises from the analyst's capacity to sustain uncertainty, to tolerate not understanding, and to refrain from explanation where explanation would serve as defense. This position can be uncomfortable both for the analyst and for the analyst. The analyst and often demands knowledge. They want explanations, diagnosis, or guidance. The analyst's refusal to provide this can provoke frustration. But this frustration is not accidental. It is structurally necessary. It prevents analysis from becoming a transfer of knowledge and keeps open the space where truth can appear. This also explains why schools, doctrines, and orthodoxies can become forms of resistance. When psychoanalysis solidifies into a body of unquestionable knowledge, it ceases to function as analysis. It becomes an ideology. Lacan's teaching repeatedly warns against this danger, including within Lacanian circles themselves. The task is not to replace one orthodoxy with another, but to preserve the analytic function of theory. In practical terms, this means that theory must illuminate speech, not replace it. Knowledge must support listening, not dictate interpretation. Opinion must be recognized as such, not smuggled in as neutrality. And truth must be allowed to remain partial, disruptive, and unresolved. This prepares us for the next step. If knowledge and opinion can function as defenses, then we must ask what in psychic life resists knowledge most insistently. This question brings us back to repetition. In the next episode, we will revisit beyond the pleasure principle and examine why repetition exceeds both knowledge and intention, and why it poses a decisive challenge to ego-based models of psychic life. Thank you for listening. This is the William Gomes podcast. Take care of yourself, stay curious, and if you found this episode helpful, you're very welcome to follow, share, leave a comment or a rating. I'll speak with you again soon.